Welcome to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Join attorneys James Moore, Kevin Littlejohn, and Misty Blagg as they explore law, technology, and persuasive arguments. Sit back, relax, and listen to your zealous advocates.
Welcome back to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. I'm Misty Blagg, attorney at Shipman Wright, here with my friends and colleagues and fellow attorneys, James Moore and Kevin Littlejohn.
Pleasure to be here.
As always.
Welcome. The band is back together, and we are joined by a wonderful host, Amanda Haverstick, today. Amanda has a long history, a long career in working in labor and employment litigation, but the most exciting thing is recently she's done a big career pivot, and she is a legal writing coach to both attorneys and law students. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This is fabulous. I'm so happy to be here and talk about these things. I love it that anyone wants to talk about it. People in my real life, when I talk about LinkedIn, sort of go, I don't know.
Well, Amanda has become really well known for her Dear 1L, I would say, posts on LinkedIn that's really speaking out to law students and those very new law students. And then she's now began to post Dear Legal Writer, which is more targeted at attorneys. So, Amanda, I just want to know, where did you get your inspiration to start the Dear 1L posts that have been so popular?
You know, when I first started on LinkedIn, I was writing to law students, but I was not writing as Dear 1L. It was 1L Tip Today. And I had my first 10 posts were entitled 1L Tip Today. And at the time I was tutoring, so it seemed like it made sense to talk to people that were my clients, but it also, I felt more comfortable. I mean, LinkedIn was so scary. It still is for me to post. So it was somehow talking to people my daughter's age and that I felt comfortable giving advice to. I thought maybe I would come off less of a, I don't know. It just seemed more able to find my voice that way. I was. And then one day, that was in September of 2001, and then one day in November, I've always been a letter writer, and I just thought, what if I just wrote to them? And I've always been told on LinkedIn that you should write to one person, so you shouldn't have it Dear 1Ls or Dear Law Students. It should be an individual that you're talking to, because everyone wants to get something that's meant for them as opposed to just to a group. And that it's both limiting talking to one person and having to make the language work out and that, but it's also more intimate. And I try to visualize one person that I'm talking to when I write. So it's very fulfilling. And I was sort of keeping track of my views with pencil on a piece of paper. I still have it. I got to do a post sometime on it, but from the early days, and I mean, it's in pencil, literally, and the jump, it was just a big spike with Dear 1L, and I liked it. I liked the tone I could take in a letter, and I felt much more comfortable and really came into my own. So that's how that started.
Right. And they're very nurturing. Yeah. And that's why, Kevin, I know you know this because you're a mama's boy. Let's all admit it.
Well, James is also a mama's boy. I'm not the only mama's boy in here.
You needed that nurturing sort of environment in law school. And I think a lot, I went as an older adult, so not necessarily, that's what I needed, but I know a lot do. So I think that's why it really resonates.
So I had a question for you, Amanda, with respect to the way you frame these Dear 1L posts. How much of it is you drawing on your experience from being in the legal profession and being a 1L in law school, and how much of it is you observing sort of the landscape of law school today and what students are going through today, or is it a blend of both?
It's what's been interesting is that I get a lot of my inspiration from things that I experience and from things that I know my clients were experiencing. And you can also, I mean, just to find out if you're trying to target, not really target, but if you're trying to have your posts reach people and resonate with them, you need to know what's going on with them. And there's Facebook groups, you can go on Reddit, you can go on Quora, and people are talking and speaking. And I spent a lot of time investing in that and talking to people and getting ideas. And now people come to me and ask me things, and that's a big source of it. But I would say on the legal writing front, it's mostly from what I saw, my frustration as a senior counsel, seeing new people come out of law school and just not knowing how to write. And frankly, a lot of partners not being very good writers either. And I thought, wow, if I could somehow, change this at the beginning or give people, make it fun to learn and inspire people, I thought it would be good. And so a lot of it comes from mistakes I saw associates make, to be honest, on the writing.
Well, you know what always drove me just a little bit crazy about legal writing class? Let's talk about the catastrophe that is.
Well, I'm not going to go that far.
I am right up there.
I know.
Yeah,
biggest victims. Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah, like go read a book about writing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really? That's going to help me to read a book about writing. You know what helps me is writing and getting some feedback without somebody telling me I just made a 40 on something.
Well, I agree with that. Now, we did. I will say this, though. When we got into, and it was an elective, maybe it should have been a required course.
Yeah.
When we got into advanced legal writing, if you wanted to take it, because you were, by the time you got out of the legal research and writing courses, you might have been fed up with the class. But if you had a chance to take advanced legal writing, it was with Professor Robert Montgomery, who wrote
he was fabulous
for the Court of Appeals. I think he also may have been on the Supreme Court.
He did. He oral arguments from the Supreme Court.
He was probably the best writer I'd ever seen. So being able to learn from him was a good experience. But I think that practitioner perspective from legal writing, much like you provide to your viewers, Amanda, is what really helps 1Ls grow the most.
Yeah. What's your experiences from legal writing class, James? You're going to have to reach way back.
I mean, that was a long time ago.
Had to put that stone tablet up.
I'll be honest with you. Being a finance major in undergrad, I was awful at writing essays. I've told you guys before, I was awful thinking in the abstract. I thought there was a definite answer for everything. So being able to see two sides of anything and then put it down on paper to make it sound competent was very difficult for me initially in law school. And it was kind of I had great professors that helped me in the process, but just continuing to practice, I think, is what helped me a ton.
Yeah, and just being okay with failure. I know I came from healthcare where, Lord, we write medical charts and not incomplete sentences, and definitely with not any grammar that was correct and proper.
Well, I'll tell you what always killed me, Amanda.
Text messages. Imagine
that kills you all.
What text messaging is doing for people and the way they talk.
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And no one knows how to spell because of spell check, and no one knows. I mean, everything is going to
Well, I catch myself, like, even when I start writing something, because of the texting, like, I'll forget I'll just put just, just things like that, because you're trying to make it simplistic, just like you would in a text message. So that, for our younger generation, that's a big problem.
I struggled with this, Amanda, and you probably help a lot of people with this. When I first got out of law school, I was so quick or eager to want to find my voice in my legal writing, and my feedback from James and the partners was my tone came across as too conversational or too, almost as if it wasn't as professional enough. But I thought it was me, letting my voice shine through my writing, much like you would in sort of narrative writing. And so my biggest struggle, and I'm sure you see it, is knowing what your voice is in legal writing versus knowing what your voice is in writing, like, just formal letters or journals or narratives. Because I found myself taking out a lot of things that I thought were creative, literary devices and things of that sort, and replacing it with much more just streamlined, punctual, legal, well, I won't say legalese, but professional more writing. And that was a difficult adjustment for me. I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest adjustment. Is sometimes the best writers from college who really are great with allegory and metaphor and flowery adverbs and adjectives and all that, and that college fosters that, because you've got professors using big pedagogical words, and they're talking about abstract concepts and someone once explained it to me in college that with a thesis or something, you're almost trying to make the problem as complicated as possible. And then you just say, but don't worry, I'm so smart. I'm going to show you. And you got to be really smart to stay along with me. Mm-hmm. Whereas in legal writing, you want to reduce to the absolute most basic and simple what problems that are already extraordinarily complex and make them understandable. So I would say it's good to find a voice that would be informal if you look at that and say everything that you write should be speakable. It's something that you would feel comfortable speaking. But it's going to be different because obviously you're not going to have contractions and you're going to use some formula, but you're there to communicate information to your reader. So the less you spend thinking about what should it sound like, or what would sound good, or what would I enjoy writing, think about your reader getting information. And that's the purpose, is just explaining a situation that's very complicated to someone that you're sitting across from the table and you're just talking to. And that is just a mind shift that if you can get into, you'll find your creativity in other ways. I mean, I'm very creative in my legal writing. Probably I take a little liberty, but you can just vary your sentence length, use words that sound, thump and make people stop, have a 3-word sentence. You can use creativity, but it's a very different way than they taught you in college. Mm-hmm. And so there's definitely a big learning curve that's really lifelong, I think.
Well, how many years in as a litigator, Amanda, did you just really feel like, okay, I got this? I'm feeling pretty confident about, the work product that I'm turning out.
I would say when partners didn't change anything and it went straight to the client. And that would be okay. And then the client often had no changes either, and it would be filed. And then my firms, I guess luckily, but it's a non-billable thing, which was sort of the story of my life in big law. But I was training all of the new lawyers in how to write and training. I mean, I was doing that. So that's obviously a stamp of, okay. And I think with anything, once you sort of, the landscape, you've read everything, all the advice, and you have your own opinion, that's when you start to feel, okay, well, I'm just going to say what I think, because yes, some people will disagree with me, but I so that's sort of how when it comes, and a lot of it is age and experience, really.
Yep. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Amanda, one of the biggest things I struggle with is patience with younger associates when it comes to drafting briefs, especially given the deadlines, that are typically on the horizon. And I find myself a lot of the times just taking control and redoing it myself. And I know that's terrible for, the person that you're obviously trying to help. But, take me through that process, like how, and I know you can't do anything with the deadline, but how do you, how do you make them, know exactly what you need in this brief, but at the same time, let them do it where you're not spoon feeding them?
That's a great question, James.
Yeah. And because of time exigencies, there's some realities that make that hard. I think that it's both of your responsibilities. I think associates are not particularly good about getting feedback, and I wasn't either. So sure. I'm not being critical, but it's really hard to get a wall of red back or just to get all these changes. But I was forced to, type them in myself and make it my own.
Got it.
So I would get pencil scribble that from partners, and I would have to interpret that, realize, well, they don't really mean that, but I get what they mean. So therefore change it and put it in my own words.
Yeah.
So I think that is you got to empower them, and it will take a little longer. So there's a little bit of a give and take, but rather than doing a red line, what if you make them type in all your changes and you make them make sure they understand them? That's on them. They have to take ownership and do it. But I think that if it becomes a thing where they know that you want them to succeed and that they understand the everything working against it, the deadlines, the clients, and just wanting to get it done, and the frustration because they keep making the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
That you got to explain those things to them, but obviously it's in my interest and yours if you were getting better at this, but they have to meet you halfway. So I think, you could probably, it depends on the people. Some people aren't going to get motivated and other people will.
Well, but I think the key is, it's not necessarily all the changes that are made. And I think it's interesting that you talk about maybe hand editing. I definitely learned better from that. But it's how you present those changes, right? It's you present them with like, look, we're both in this together to get you across the finish line. Instead of saying, oh, you made 3 errors. How awful. You're not getting this. And you're like 6 months into practice. That's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the grammatical stuff will bother you. The more concerning thing I see is, when someone's writing a brief on an issue, but they completely miss the issue. Mm-hmm. Where you're having to sit down like, hey, I understand this is a breach of contract, but we're a little bit further in than just the elements of a breach of contract. Like right. you need to take me down to the specific issues that are relevant to this case. And with younger,
that's hard because in law school, they don't teach you how to jump to the issue, right? Yeah. Did you find that too, Amanda, that early practicing attorneys, they don't know how to cut right to the issue?
I still don't, Amanda. I still don't.
I would say that they're very tentative writers. So they like frameworks and it's just, they don't really, they wouldn't be able to write a reply brief. They don't have the ability to sort of hone in, and it's more following a formula. But there's so many problems coming up. What I thought you were going to say was really annoying you was, because I used to see it all the time, is people cutting and pasting from cases online and not reading what the cases say or understanding them, and not fitting the quotes into the prose that surrounds them, and then not really thinking and not analyzing, just sort of cutting and pasting quotes in court sites. And that's what people do at firms that, the client's paying them a low amount, or an insurance company. Yeah. But it certainly is a really bad habit. And a lot of young people already seem in it because of their, affinity for just, take everything from online. Why would I need to fill in a pinpoint? Someone asked me that when I was lost to do this. And they were like, it's right there. It's just right there on the computer when you take the quote. And I'm just kind of like, no, because that's just not how I do it. But I realize I need to adjust too, because I'm not as good with the technology, and I admit that. So I'm trying to meet them halfway.
We have trust issues too, Well, Kevin, do you use an editing checklist?
Well, not necessarily like, I don't know, like a formal writing. Yeah, James. I'll send it to James. I like to use, when we talk about the grammar side, I do like to put mine in Grammarly. I'll do that. But with respect to like checking sites, my process goes, I'll write the brief, and then I'll have the brief read to me by Microsoft will read it aloud to you. So I'll have it read aloud. Yeah, I'll have it read aloud to me. So then that's kind of my way of checking like the flow, and if I just have stupid things that shouldn't fit in the sentence. And then once I make sure I've got at least the words that I want on the page, and then that's when I make the third pass on. I'm looking at citations if I want to maybe put a parenthetical to further explain the citation, things of that sort. And then my fourth one is preceded by a prayer. And I asked the Lord just to make sure that this is good work product, and I send it to James or Gary or somebody. And then James sends back.
It looks like Jesus is talking.
It looks like Jesus talked through the entire portion of the brief. But no, I was going to go back to another point that you made. I recall one of the first briefs that I was writing was and one of the issues was unfair and deceptive trade practices. Mm-hmm. And I had little experience with unfair and deceptive in law school. I didn't really know much about it. So I did what we just talked about, kind of put in just to standard framework. And I just remember seeing an email from Gary to James that was like, I need you to put together an unfair and deceptive analysis. And he sent it back to me, and Gary would send them to me as well. He'd say, hey, I want you to compare what you wrote here to what James and I put together here. And I would look at it, and that was like the first time I really realized like the amount of depth that you've got to go into on issues, or you can't be afraid to go into on issues. And you never want to really compromise that. I think being overly analytical of an issue is way better than being underly analytical of an issue.
Well, and Amanda, we have one motto here when it comes to hearings and briefs, and it is whoever's brief is longer wins.
Ooh, it gets rough around here.
We're trying to get out of that, Amanda, but it just always feels like the longer one wins, but I know it's not true.
Never true.
Yeah.
Never true.
Do you have a process for writing? Because I'm writing about the flowers paradigm right now. And my question, and which if you don't know what it is, I'll tell you, but most people have read Garner and know about it. But and then my question is, do practicing attorneys, does anyone use flowers per se, or do you have your own process? So that was very interesting just to me to hear about the process at the end. But in terms of just how you go from all the research mess to having a draft, I mean, that's sort of what Flowers deals with. And I'm just curious if any of you use it, or you just kind of wade through the fog.
Well, I've never heard of Flowers before. That's my first time hearing of Flowers.
But I tell you what I do is I get my headings first, which is basically your outline, right? I have to get my headings first. And then sometimes when I'm starting to write, I get writer's block. So when I'm starting to write the body, sometimes I just have to free write, because I'll have researched it enough to generally know the law, and then I'll free write. And then after I get a flow, then I'll go back and support it with the law and the facts in the case. And that's just because, I'm still learning too. I'll be honest,
Well, I do. Well, it depends on who drafted the motion. So if my motions are always these initially they were always these bare bone motions that I thought would just get past the specificity requirement for a motion. And I would find myself getting to the time in which I need to write a brief and do all the research, trying to figure out an outline, a way to put the brief together. And then I had to write a brief, or assist James with the brief. And I looked at his motions, and his motions had a far more structured approach where there was, this claim needs to be dismissed because this element can't be satisfied, and here's why. And then once I was able to go look at the motion, it was often easier for me to be able to put together, once I put it in a Word document, just little sentences or little case sites or little points that I wanted to make under each paragraph that he would put in that motion. And it made it far more easy for me to write and made my actual brief flow much better. So I think, at least in certain circumstances, having a well-reasoned motion can help you a lot of times frame a well-reasoned and written brief.
Yep.
And a corollary to that is that sometimes in some jurisdictions, you have to write a form order, which is what you want the court to order, literally. And you would be very happy if they didn't cross out a thing and didn't change a word on it. That can be a really good skeleton model as well. And I would often find, if I was halfway through the process and then I wrote the order, that would help me remember sort of the outline and really what I wanted the court to do. And that can focus it a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I want to bring
I didn't want to know, though. I didn't know this part, Missy. I'm sorry to cut you off.
You do it all the time.
I'm sorry, but she was talking about this flowers thing.
Slapping you every
I know.
time you cut me
Look.
off.
Well, when she was talking about flowers, she said if we didn't know flowers, ask her what flowers was. And I'm curious about what this flowers. Is it a program?
Flowers thing too. I know, right? So all right, this is going to be a really quick rendition. Barbara Flowers was an English professor. It's named after her. Brian Garner, the sort of, I think of him as the grandfather of legal writing, and Ross Guberman then probably comes next. But he wrote about it and made it famous in the legal writing context. And a lot of people have it, like Ross has his own variation, and now Brian Garner has his own variation, and Ryan McCarl has his own, and everyone's sort of calling their own thing different. But it at the root is that first you get all your ideas down. Stage one is called the madman. I call it the muse, but Flowers called it the madman, where it's just brainstorming. You get everything down. All your ideas, doesn't matter if it's a big idea, a small idea, if it's one reason of part B under, Roman numeral 2, it doesn't matter. Just get them all down. and don't think about order and just think of all the ideas. And then you're going to try to distill 3 to 4 of reasons that support your motion or whatever you're trying to prove. And then what he does this whirly bird diagram, but I do a flower because I just think that's easier to remember. And I think of a flower coming out of a pot, and the pot, if you label it as, this is my thing I'm trying to prove. And you've got 3 flowers coming out. Or 3 or 4, and then each one's got petals, and you can kind of make this outline from all the stuff that was on the paper or in your head, or maybe some people do a whiteboard. But that's like the key thing is to there, and then not to start writing according to Flowers and Garner until you've figured out all the pieces and where they go. Now, I can't do that. I think that takes extraordinary to be able to envision the entire brief and at each level before you write it. I need to do what Misty said and play around, but it's this idea. Stage 1 is the madman. Stage 2 is the architect, which is like if you're building a house. Once you have a vision of what it's going to look like, you need a floor plan. So that's like doing your outline. Then after that, you're the builder of the house, you're the writer, and it doesn't make sense to write these sentences until you know where they're going to go and stuff like that. And then the key is to keep off the 4th stage, which is the judge editor, until you've already got stuff down. Because if you let your internal critic hamper the free flow of writing, you're going to end up having topic sentences and transitions that somehow move. So you've wasted all that time making them perfect, and then they don't fit.
No,
but so that's the sort of in the ideal world, and you can take parts of it or adapt your style with it. So I think it can be a helpful framework to think about.
Well, I think that was a really good point with the flower diagram. And honestly, I think we do a lot of our brainstorming orally here in the office. I mean, so I think that reinforced some things that we do. But I want to bring up your memo editing checklist, because I actually love checklists and everything I do. I want us to talk about a few of the items.
Kevin, save this to your favorites.
Okay. Kevin, I want you to read number 6 out loud.
Oh, my.
Block quotes. Use sparingly, if at all. But if you do use, the ending citation goes flush left, a double space below the quote, and the cite should not be indented. I agree. I disagree with that. Oh, the cite shouldn't. Yes, I agree with that.
What do you think about that sparingly? Because you love a block quote.
I do. It goes back to my 1L writing experience, because we had to do an analysis of an issue. And my thought was, okay, I'm not a judge. There's clearly been a judge at the Supreme Court that has said what the resolution needs to be. There's little to no input for me on this issue. So I just went through this.
God has spoken.
Yeah, I went through the entire brief, and it was 90. What's the bunch, like 50 words or more has to be a block quote. So, I had probably like 10, James. It was, all you see is these little 0.5 margins on both sides, just block. It might be in one sentence between and further the court said, boom, another block quote. And my professor was like, Kevin, you block quoted this entire essay. I said, you're right, I did, Professor Oden, because the court has already spoken on this issue.
Okay, and so don't look at the screen. How do you spell judgment when you're saying summary judgment?
No E.
Okay.
Everybody knows that.
Him on that. Okay.
Everybody knows that.
All right, so we're going to go down. What does number 11 say here?
As such, what? Don't use it. It does not mean therefore. I don't ever say as such, though. I think James says as.
I definitely say the next one.
I say therefore.
Okay.
In the case of ours.
Use it unless you know what it means. And no one knows what it means. They think it means therefore. Mm-hmm. That's how they use it. If you're going to use it properly, it's fine. But I'm telling 1L, just don't bother. You don't need it. It's just you're going to get it wrong.
Okay, Amanda, this has been something that's been the subject of debate before. Should you start a sentence with the word therefore?
Oh, 100%.
What's your opinion on that? Starting a sentence with the word therefore?
Should you? It's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly grammatically correct, and sometimes that can be the right transition. But I would say 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't start it at the first. I would put it, halfway or a couple words into the sentence.
Yeah. You see that?
What
Kevin?
about and? Can you start a sentence with and?
You can.
Absolutely.
See, that's where I struggle. Because there's so many times I want to start a sentence with and I just remember Miss Novak from the 3rd grade just like killing my paper. I mean, she killed my paper. I used to start sentences with and. You can't start a sentence with and. You can't start. I'm like, why not? And then I get here.
How about but? But is another one.
I like to start sentences with but sometimes.
I don't. I do not start a sentence with but.
Yeah,
I can't.
Yeah, you gotta get on the butt wagon.
Get on the butt train.
All right now. So that's cool. What about because? Because I've actually had writing redlined with because came out, and they would always substitute it for due to or something like that, and wouldn't let because start a sentence.
That's not unless it's a certain type of law. I mean, I've had some patent lawyers that I've worked with, and they write in passive voice because you're actually supposed to in certain contexts. So I can't tell you in all contexts, but because is sort of a magic word. You never have to vary your style. It's just always the right word. And all of the other ones are wordy, clunky, and can be not quite accurate in terms of what you mean. So it's just easier to go with because. That's my theory on that.
If I could take out therefore and accordingly in my briefs, it'd probably be half the length.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's go back to let's see what else we got on here. It seemed like there was one or two more utilize. Don't use it.
What do you mean?
Use the word use. And now tell us why that is, Amanda.
Well, because why are you saying utilize? I mean, use is shorter. It's simpler. It means if it means the same thing, use is better because it's shorter, easier, and more simple. If it means something different, which it can, because utilize technically means to use in a way for which something is not intended, like to, I don't know, utilize a pen when I don't have a screwdriver to try to turn something. I mean, I'm utilizing it. So it can be a synonym for use, but it has got this other meaning. And I think that people use it to sound smart or like they're trying to be more sophisticated. So that's my take on that word. I feel pretty strongly too.
Tom, can you pull that list back up, Tom? I want to see all of them. Can you go to the top?
Yeah.
Okay, so mismatched pronouns. A pronoun. Okay, I like defined. Okay. Oh, okay.
What you
the defined terms. I'm a sucker for putting a parenthetical of what someone will be called in the complaint.
Yeah, like
and never calling them that again.
Like I just drafted some discovery requests and had to add some defined terms there. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Capitalization of at.
Well, this is because 1Ls don't know how to use word. And so they don't understand it's capitalizing it as if it's a new sentence because there's already a period at the end of the sentence. So then, I mean, if it's a site, I mean, there can be or something. And so it capitalizes it automatically and they don't know how to change it. So, I mean, it's really but this, I mean, I think I've got 3 checklists. This is the fall 1L checklist.
Yeah.
Oh, they're a little bit more seasoned.
That's 7.
Things, I mean, everyone knows we don't use superscript, but they are just learning. And these are the mistakes they make on their memo.
Yeah.
You know what I see?
What's that?
And maybe I'm wrong here. So when we underline the ID, leave the period out. You do not underline the period.
Yes, you do.
All right, here we go. We got an expert right here. Do we underline the period?
You underline the period, but not the comma afterwards.
Okay. All right. So, but this is my real question. So, if we're citing to a case, we underline it.
But when I see so much problems,
I see when people cite to like a record or they're citing to the record, pretty much they still underline it, and I'm like, that's not proper, is it?
That's a law firm style thing. If it's continuing, I mean, you don't underline the space, but some people will put an underline under like Exhibit A, and some people don't. I mean, that's a law firm style thing. I've seen it done a lot of different ways.
Well, I'm going to settle another dispute here, okay? Should you use the word clearly in a brief?
100%.
Clearly.
If it's clear.
Clearly.
I mean, if it's clear, you got to use clearly. I mean, if it's first, you say firstly.
Unequivocally, beyond capital, indubitably.
So
beyond peradventure. That's one I actually had when I first started. There was a very senior partner, female, but I was doing labor law, so it was kind of rough and tumble. But the briefs, she would say, it is beyond peradventure. And I was like, what? I had to look it up, but I'm glad I didn't learn. I'm glad it didn't stick.
Lord.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, look, we all wanted to try. Any other questions before we do your 1L?
Yes, one last question.
Of course, Kevin has.
I mean, we got a writing expert. I got a lot of writing questions.
How long will it take you to teach Kevin how to write? I have slowly climbed the ladder here. It's probably third.
Actually, I won't even say that. I'm joking. But with respect to spacing after a period, is it still the best practice to double space while you're writing, or is it okay now just to single space after writing, after a sentence?
This is a debate that has nothing to do with is it okay or is it proper. I would say that your generation, everyone who's under a certain age will think it's better to have one space. I started with 2 spaces. Now I write with 1 space, in part because I write on LinkedIn and I have an extra character or space. I just try to make it as short as possible. And so I can see the merit in how it makes sense to have 2 spaces. It makes more sense to have 2 spaces.
Why?
In many ways, it just, I could argue that then go down the, split hairs, but it also makes more sense to do 1 space in many ways. So I don't think there's a right answer, but do whatever the partner or judge that you're writing for likes.
Yeah, no, that's the bottom line, isn't it?
That's the point right there.
Yes.
Do what the partner wants.
Well, doesn't matter what I say.
Well, we all want to take our little practice at doing our own little Dear 1Ls. We're gonna talk about. So, James, I think you're up first. Let's hear.
Hold on, we got to talk about it. Okay, so we know what it is, right?
Yeah,
so,
we talked about our dear
a vote of confidence.
Well, you can make it whatever you want, Kevin. Okay. You want to go first?
No, I want to go second.
Go ahead.
I'm second. It's on the list as you first.
All right.
Okay.
This is a sales pitch.
This is going to be tragic.
Oh, God.
Dear 1L.
I'm not looking at you.
Congratulations. Mm-hmm. You're about to embark on a journey that a lot of people want, but most fail to achieve.
Yeah.
Your past accomplishments, achievements got you here, but they won't keep you here.
Oh.
This profession, Kevin, and law school, it's a privilege. It's not an obligation. Treat it that way throughout your time in law school. Be consistent and be intentional with your time, with your work ethic, and you'll be just fine.
Oh, well, all of that is good, valuable information.
I like, you touched on so many things. I can't even begin to start unpacking, but it sounds wonderful. I like your tone, especially.
It was full of buzzwords, Miss Haverstick. It was full of buzzwords. I mean, you talk about a litigator who's just using buzzwords in front of the bench. I mean, intentional. I didn't hear one thing about what it took to be successful.
All right, let's hear yours. We're about to.
Dear 1L.
Wow, you have it written down.
I don't have it written down. Dear 1L. If one word could make you successful throughout your time in law school, that word would have to be curiosity. Over the course of these next 3 years, you'll be presented with a multitude of challenges, some that you'll be familiar with, some that you will not. But the one thing you will need at every time you step into the classroom is intellectual curiosity. Up to this point in your life, you've been successful in your educational endeavors. But now the time for mere schooling is over. And as the Greeks say, paideia, a deep educational learning is needed. Stay curious and you'll stay successful.
You went on Ted Lasso.
Oh, that paideia, Jake. Pedagogical, you know what I'm saying? That comes from that's the root there. Paideia.
That was good.
It's a difference in cheap education.
That was good.
That was.
You never disappoint, Kev.
I'm trying.
All right, here's mine.
Hold on, I don't get any feedback on that. I mean, that was paideia was probably the best thing to say.
That was good.
I don't know. You
How
Ted.
do you spell paideia?
It's not by
A-I-D-E-I-A. AI. I don't know.
He totally made
I
it up.
heard it. Pi Day is a real thing, though. Have we all heard of Pi Day before?
No, I
Oh,
have not.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
oh my God! It's the root for pedagogical. It's the root word from the Latin.
You're killing me.
I believe
I
it.
hate
All
y'all.
right, let's hear it, Misty. Let's hear it.
Dear 1L, it's okay to use old outlines and use one color to make your own notes before class and another color pen to make your notes during class.
Amen.
It is okay when you give a definition. I lost my picture. You got to see me in this. I'm going to have to start over because this is very important. Maybe I won't.
I want to say this though. I find this very frustrating.
Okay.
That you have written one down. You tell James and I this an
agree.
hour before we come up here, and you've written one down. Which I had. If I would have done that,
Well, when you do the outlines, then you can do that. Okay.
All right, let's do
I'm going
it.
to start over. Dear 1L, it's okay to use old outlines and write your own notes in one color and then your notes you take during class in a different color. It's okay when you give the definition from one of those outlines out loud in class and then the professor turns to you and says, "Do you have an old outline?" It's okay because you'll just respond, "Yes, professor, but it was so brilliant. I thought it needed to be shared in class."
Terrible.
Last, remember, laughter is one of the best treatments for anxious moments. Remember to laugh as much as you worry. That's all.
That sounds like a commencement speech.
That was a good happy note to end on. And
What?
Speaking of which, I met someone whose last name is Laughter.
Oh.
And I was so overjoyed to read this. I just wrote him and I said, "I want your last name. Where did you get it? That's wonderful." And he sent me back this whole story, and that was the key to why his wife married him. And anyway, so that was like, how great to be reminded that you need laughter every day. And then Misty, now you say it.
Yes, no, it's absolutely true. I think we do this a lot, as you have seen, Amanda. Well, Amanda, tell me this. How do lawyers engage your services? How do law students do that? And, one of the things I found really interesting is lawyers, are you seeing that firms are paying for your type of coaching that you provide, or do they pay on their own? How does that work?
Every single possible arrangement that could be made has been made. I sort of created my own role. So what I do is a little different than what other people do. But yeah, I've got law firms who will hire me for various different reasons, but I have a lot of individual lawyers who reach out to me who don't want their firm to know, or who do, or were told by the firm that they should get a tutor. So it can be either one, and then just how what we do paperwork wise and how it all works out differs. But my website, thanks for putting it up. I mean, it's amandahaverstick.com or dear1l.com, and legal, it's Writing Law Tutors is the name.com too. You can get there. I have 1 million domains because I was sort of crazy at the beginning because I didn't know.
Well, that's wonderful. So here, you guys, I think investing in yourself and investing in your own career is one of the best decisions you'll ever make. So I hope this episode has made you feel more comfortable with Amanda, more comfortable that people need help with writing and to reach out to her. Amanda, it's been lovely having you here. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yes,
It's been a joy.
Absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Everyone, thank you for watching the Zealous Advocate podcast. We feel so wonderful to be bringing you this second season and diving in there just a little bit deeper to persuasive arguments and oral advocacy and written advocacy, if I can say that word
Very fortunate
properly.
right now. Very fortunate.
Yeah, we feel very fortunate.
Great guest this year so far too.
So far. Yep.
Been
And
good.
we'll keep going. We're going to keep going. And please watch our podcast on Spotify and it's on all the other platforms that you can find your podcast. We would love if you would give us a rating, especially if it's a good one. And please join us next time on the Zealous Advocate podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.